news coming out of America, I wanted to talk a bit about a particular transgender woman in sport. Now, immediately there's going to be a bunch of people that go, "Oh, this is a sensitive topic," and you know what? On some levels, it is a sensitive topic. But I truly and genuinely believe that we're not actually having the right conversation yet about this issue. I really believe that. I want to talk about it, and all I would say to you to encourage you to be a part of this conversation with me is watch the whole thing or watch none of it. You know, I don't want to be thinking that I'm putting out information that is detrimental to any one group of people. I want to talk about something openly and honestly with all of you. So I don't know how long this is going to go for, 10, 12, 14 minutes. If you haven't got that time to watch it, then don't watch it at all. Other than that, I want to have a conversation with you because my ultimate heart for conversations like this is I want to see people be safe. I want to see people be happy. I want to see people live their best life, their full self. And in general, whatever that means for you, you be you, boo. I really support you and don't care how and why you want to live your life on a personal individual's level, right? So I want to talk about this situation, and even though you may not recognize the name, I'm sure most of you would have heard the story about the transgender athlete in the US. Her name is Leah Thomas, and she's been, knocking over records and swimming amazingly fast races as she started to compete in the women's division. So she used to compete, I think it's for Penn State, in the men's division, then transitioned and started competing in the women's division. Now, let me also say, pardon me, that at the start, Leah is completely within the rules. There's nothing that Leah is doing that is wrong or like cheating or anything like that, because these are the current rules and Leah is abiding by them 100% fine with that. All right. So the story that has been told about Leah is how she is, kind of swimming really fast in the nation, favorite to win. Well, in the weekend that's just gone, she became the first transgender athlete to win an NCAA swimming title. Now, NCAA in America is huge. We often hear about the Final Four with basketball, and it's basically, the number one competition for the best colleges in the country. They have Division I, Division II, Division III colleges, and if you win a title, it basically means you're the best in the country for that. So in the weekend just gone, Leah Thomas won the 500 yards, I think it was. It's a 500 yards. Leah Thomas took the control in the final 100 yards of the 500-yard freestyle to make history Thursday as the first known transgender woman to win an NCAA swimming championship. Now, the reason I think that we're having the wrong conversation is the question that we're asking now is, should or shouldn't transgender women be allowed to compete in elite sports? I don't think we're talking about, what we would call high school sports or college sports, our secondary school, because I think most of those sports at that level are about participation. I don't think that's what, and look, to be honest with you, if you're a, 12-year-old girl and you want to play rugby at your school, chances are you're playing in a boys team because there may not be an all girls team. So that happens, or cricket, any of those sorts of things. It does happen. But I think the conversation we need to be having first is, do transgender women athletes have an advantage physically? And I would say yes. And until we have that conversation and get to a definitive yes or no, we can't have the second conversation, which is, should transgender women compete in elite sports? Now, I'm going to go through why I think there is an advantage. If you want to disagree with me, if you want to have your own thoughts and opinions, then feel free to share your stuff. But what I don't and won't sort of accept as evidence is personal experience. I don't deny your lived experience or your personal existence, but what that is referred to as anecdotal evidence, and that anecdotal evidence or lived experience may not be representative of the data. So I'm going to give you some stuff that makes me think that there is an advantage, because then what I believe the actual conversation should be is, and this is how I would word it, now that we have definitively shown that transgender women have a physical advantage, should we allow them to compete in elite sports? And I know that some people are going to roll their eyes and go, who the fuck are you to say, should we allow? I guess what I'm saying is we as society need to come to that realization, and then the bodies need to decide. But because there's still an argument going on of, is there an advantage, we actually are having the wrong conversation. So let me show you something here, okay? So the 500-yard freestyle was just won by Leah Thomas, making her the fastest woman athlete in that range in America at college level. Now, the other thing I'm being really careful to do here is I'm not going to dead name Leah. There are some articles and stuff that I'm not going to show because they use masculine pronouns and stuff. I'm genuinely not interested in any of that, right? I really want to look at the data of, is there an advantage? So here would be my premise for why there is. These times here are the best times that Leah Thomas has ever swum. Now, these times were swum when Leah Thomas was competing in the men's category. The reason that I've scrolled up on this, and I hope you can't see the top part up here, is because that has Leah Thomas's dead name. I don't want to show Leah Thomas's dead name. This is genuinely not about embarrassing someone or saying, look at that, man competing as a woman. It's not about that. Genuinely is not. So I've got rid of anything to do with Leah's previous iteration of a name, previous pronouns, all that kind of stuff, because that's not the conversation. The conversation is the 500-meter free right here that you can see. Can I highlight that? I can't. The best time that Leah in Leah's life ever did for the 500 free was 4 minutes 18 seconds 0.72. Right, that's the best time. So Leah on her best day as an athlete did 4:18.72. Okay, part of my argument for there is an advantage comes down to that. Leah was the best woman athlete in the NCAA for the 500 free. If Leah compared her time to the male times at that same meet, right, the male time, her best time ever, Leah would have come 47th. So someone who would have performed the best they've ever done would have been 47th amongst the men, because you can see this is 4:18.71, 4:19.25. So that's where Leah would have come, is now the best in the country woman swimmer. That says to me there is a physical advantage. Now, some people may, and maybe fairly so, also go, well, but Leah didn't win everything, right? And you're right. If you Google Leah Thomas, you can see in this Google search that Leah came 5th in the 200 free, right? And Leah came 8th in the 100 yard. So Leah's not winning every single race. However, I would say again, what you need to do is now compare this to when Leah was competing as a male to when Leah is competing as a woman, or a man to a woman. Sorry, I'm getting gender. As a man to a woman. The best time Leah ever has done for the 200-yard freestyle, the best time ever, would not have even been, she would have been last. The last time for the men's 200-yard freestyle at that same meet was the 59th person. Her time was slower than that. So when you go, Leah would have been 60th in the men's 200 free, Leah was 5th in the women's. It's not about dominating or winning. It's about, is there an advantage? And I guess I would say to you again, going from 60th for your best time ever in the men's to 5th in the women's says to me there is an advantage. And one of the things that I think I've seen whilst investigating and looking at this pattern is the same amongst, I can't say all, but I'll say most transgender women athletes. I mean, Laurel Hubbard, for example, and I'll just say again now, in case you're picking up halfway through, this is not a commentary on who you want to be as a person, how you want to identify, what pronouns you want to use, none of those things. This is purely about the question that we need to ask first, is there an advantage? I've got a quote here from an article. I'm not going to put up the article because in the article, Laurel Hubbard's dead name is used, and Laurel Hubbard in the article it uses male pronouns. So I'm not putting it up because I don't want to offend, and I don't want this to look to me to be seen as someone piling on the transgender community. What I'm doing is trying to start an honest conversation. So this is a quote from that article. It says, at 20, Hubbard set a junior record in the 105 plus kg category with a total lift of 300 kilos. However, Hubbard's successes at junior level would never have been enough to qualify for a spot on the men's senior national team. Despite Hubbard's high school team's overall success, Hubbard's individual result in junior male competitions would never have been enough to see Hubbard qualify for a position on the men's senior national team. Laurel Hubbard then took a 17-year gap from weightlifting and then came back and for a period of time dominated the women's world. I know that didn't come to fruition as a gold medal in the Olympics. I get all that. But again, it's the difference between being an average to below average male athlete at an elite level. I mean, I'm not comparing myself to them, but at an elite level to being some of the best in the world or best in the country. Again, that seems to me to be an advantage for a transitioning male to female athlete. I did a podcast not too long ago with Professor Alison Heather. Now, Professor Alison Heather from the University of Otago, her research is, she's in the health sciences and she's in the Department of Physiology, literally about how the body works, how it's structured, how it works. And her focus is on how sex hormones, estrogen and testosterone affect non-reproductive tissues in the body. So she knows a lot about estrogen, testosterone, and how it impacts the body. We had a conversation around this, and this is from my podcast. And I wanted to know if there were definitely advantages from transitioning. And Heather shared with us about testosterone, because one of the comments we hear is once a transgender woman athlete goes on estrogen, everything's leveled out. This is what the professor had to say about how testosterone impacts a male physiology.
So basically what we reviewed was what are the advantages that males have because they've had a lifelong exposure to testosterone. What advantages does that provide for them when it comes to athletic performance? So if you want to take a male from conception and very early on in embryogenesis, that baby is exposed to high levels of testosterone, and that sets them up for later in life. So first of all, it makes them have a male-like brain. Mm-hmm. It sets up their lungs. So males have more what we call alveoli. So these are little sacs in the lungs that take in the air and allow gas exchange. So this is all happening while the baby is in utero and being exposed to those androgens in utero. During the first year of life, we have another surge of androgen where it sets up things like heart structure, where the diaphragm sits. So in a female, it sits higher because she's going to have to carry a baby during pregnancy. And so that means her lung capacity is smaller than a male. We can't change that. And so other things like bone structure, which is different for male compared to female. And this is simply because females, again, have to birth a child, so they have a wider pelvis. So the angle from the pelvis to the knee is much wider for a female than a male. So if you have a wider angle, this is just simple basic physics, a wider angle means you can't generate as much force. Right. So if you're trying to lift something like a weightlifter, you're trying to jump like a long jumper, you don't get the force that a male can have. And then equally, for our elbow joints, again, because we females have to, when we swing our arms, if we didn't have a wider angle, because we've got a wider pelvis, we'd always be hitting ourselves. So we're born naturally with wider angles at our arms. So at our elbows, sorry. So again, we throw like a girl. We literally do throw like a girl. because that angle is wider, can't generate enough force. So that's in any kind of throwing sport, javelin, if we're talking about athletics or baseball, these kind of sports. So males have an advantage. And this is before they hit puberty. And this is all because of the testosterone that was provided to them in utero.
So there are benefits before puberty that help the male physiology. Professor Heather did a bunch of research with a colleague from the biology department as well, and this is what the research has shown. Again, make this clear. I want to set up an environment where we can have this conversation honestly. And I think the first part we all need to agree to, all of us, meaning society, is there an advantage? The reason you can tell in 100 years from now if a 10-year-old skeleton is male or female is that there's physical differences. And there's physical differences primarily because of the what's happened in utero and what's happened in that first year of life, getting testosterone boosts. The other thing that's often said is that once a transgender woman athlete lowers her testosterone, then it's an even and level playing field. We went on in this conversation and I asked about that, and the professor gave an example of how they can measure the male body, not a transgender woman, but a male body with no testosterone, and what happens if that body keeps training. And have a listen.
If you lower your testosterone levels as in a trans female, remembering that the IOC, so the International Olympic Committee, only say that you have to lower your testosterone level to less than 10 nanomolar, which is still 10-fold higher than the average for a cis female. If you're sitting at around 8 or 9 nanomolar of testosterone and you're still training, it's not going to have it's not going to have much effect on your muscle mass at all. There's the memory effect of muscle as well as the training effect on muscle, and the fact that you've still got some testosterone there to help keep that muscle mass there.
Yeah.
And we know that not just from trans females, or we know that from males that have prostate cancer. So if males have prostate cancer, one of the treatments that they go on to is called androgen deprivation therapy. So they lower their testosterone to they try and get it to zero, as low as they can. And that we know that if those patients train, if they go to the gym and train, they don't lose very much muscle mass over that whole 12-month period of treatment.
So reducing the testosterone, if you do continue to train, you don't lose a lot of muscle mass. So the research and the science would say. Now, I know we've been going for a while. I do appreciate you sticking with us, the people who have stuck with us for this, or if you're watching this on demand, you have watched this on demand. I do want to mention one more thing, and that is towards the end of last year, there was a report released, or a memo, I think it technically was called, released by a trans rights group. And they were basically saying our messaging around sports is not landing. I'm going to play a part of the Rising, Ryan Grimm here talking about, because they mentioned the quote. I have a listen to this, and then we're going to wrap up. And all of you lovely people who have stayed with us, you can go and have a cup of tea and feel good about yourselves, not awkward and uncomfortable with this conversation. So let's hear Ryan talk about the memo that was released at the end of last year.
Earlier this month, the Transgender Law Center posted results from what appears to be the most comprehensive set of polling and focus group research ever released to the public on the question of trans rights. For trans advocates, there are a few cautiously optimistic findings, but more broadly, it warns of a very rocky political road ahead. The research seems to have gotten virtually zero coverage in the press. So let's go over what they found and then move on to what recommendations they make based on their findings. The clearest finding, and the one that raised the most alarms for the memo's authors, is that trans activists are getting destroyed on the question of sports. For most of the survey questions, the memo includes the numbers, even when solid majorities of the country are lined up against trans activists on a particular question. When it comes to sports, the numbers are so bad they aren't included. Instead, the memo describes the results like this. Quote, right now, our opposition wins the debate on trans youth in sports against any and all arguments we have tried for our side. There is a huge gap in awareness and concern, with most base and persuadable respondents unaware of proposals regarding transgender girls' participation in sports, while a strong majority of our opposition has heard some or a lot about it. So in polling language, what they're saying is that even after a person heard all of their arguments, all of the arguments that trans activists make about the question, the person still fell on the other side of it.
So there you go. So that's what the transgender group is saying, that actually they're not buying what we're putting out there. And I would say one of the reasons that is that I think me saying that there is an advantage, most people would go, yeah, it's obvious. There's an advantage. We can see that. But there is a sector of society that is broadcasting a lot, who are trying to sell messages like there's no advantage for trans women in sports, or once a trans woman is on estrogen, all male advantages are gone, or there's no difference between men and women at all. And that is something that some aspects, some sectors are actually saying. Look, for me, I want inclusion for everyone. I want people to be called what they want, identify as they want, do what they want with their own bodies. I genuinely don't give a fuck. You be you, boo. But there are two things that I reckon I want to put forward to start this conversation. And look, it's arrogant. I'm saying to start this conversation, but to start it. As an ally in the LGBT world for a long time, just go to my blog and see my writings. You'll see what I've written and said and supported. The community, the LGBT community, need to stop bullying people into participating in your lives and choices. You, be proud and strong, be safe and happy. But there is a lot of pressure being put on for the rest of society to fit into a very small box of acceptable and unacceptable. I mean, I don't want to get into a debate about pronouns right now, but your pronouns, this is my opinion, your pronouns are not your character. It's like you getting married and calling yourself Ms., or Mrs. It's a way of addressing you, but it's not who you are as a core person. As much, I would probably say, as your physical attributes aren't you as a core person. You say, look, as someone who probably needs to fucking have a tummy tuck and getting close to needing a little bit of pullback from a plastic surgeon, I get. Well, I actually don't get, because it's not my will, but I am trying to understand that makes you feel more comfortable and be more accepted in what you want to be. And what I'm saying is, amazing, cool, do it, go for it, do what you want, be what you want. But when it comes to some aspects of this conversation, there is a very dark and sinister part of this, and I am looking at it from my side. I equally acknowledge the dark and sinister side for the other side, right? I completely get that. And I can already hear in the back of my head what are the criticisms that are coming about suicide rates, and that I'm with you. I support you. I'm here. I agree. But people like me are allies, and we want to help and be here and help the message get across. And there is a sector of the society that are bullying and haranguing the community based on if you put the wrong letter in the wrong place of the person's name. It's not the kind of messaging you want. And when it comes down to words we use and body parts we've got, then just talk to someone who's lost a leg in an accident on their motorbike. Losing the leg is not them. Their leg is not who they are. It's basically an appendage of a blimmin' flabby part of meat, So that's the first thing. It's like, I want us to figure out how to have this conversation where everyone is as happy as possible. There's compromise between both sides, because no one's ever going to get it 100% their way. But the second thing is, I do believe, and I think I've at least put forward enough of an argument to say that there is absolute evidence that in areas of speed and strength, transgender women athletes, elite athletes, have an advantage over cisgender or biological women, or whatever is the correct term or phrase you would like me to use. And I think we need to start the conversation there, and then we can move on to the IOC or the New Zealand Rugby group, because the question shouldn't be, should trans women be competing in elite sport? In my opinion, the question should be, as there is clear biological advantage for trans women, are we okay with them competing in elite sports? So that's what I think the question should be. But we haven't got to that part yet of we're all in agreement that there's a clear biological advantage. I guess I've put forward my thing, and you're welcome to respond. However, one thing, if you want to disagree, as I said at the start, I completely respect your lived experience. I genuinely do. And I'm not really wanting to have a conversation around any one person's lived experience, but your lived experience is anecdotal evidence. It's not necessarily, agreeing with the data. So I'm not going to engage with people who tell me about their lived experience as an individual. But I'm more than happy to receive, go to patbrittenden.com, use the contacts page, information to the contrary. I know that there are articles out there that say the science is not with people who think there's an advantage. I even though I've read those articles, they don't seem to ever really have, good peer-reviewed information to show why. I'm happy to see it, send it to me, read it to me. But what I really want most of all is for us to figure out how to have this conversation, to start in an honest place, and then move forward together as a society. That would be my dream.